What is going on, everybody? Titans Universe here to give you my defensive 2021 breakdown of the Tennessee Titans. Now, with the luck of no injuries and the defensive coordinator does a decent job, I think this defense has potential to be better than the offense. I think this defense does have a kind of swagger to it. I think it would be the reason why we have won so many games. I think it's the reason why it would bail us out of some games as well. Because I do like this defense. I like how it is. I think it's better, improved from last year, but it's not like it's a top 5 defense, but I do think it's going to be a decent defense and it's going to help us win games. Now we're going to start with the defensive backs. Norris Jenkins. I think he's a solid cornerback. I think he's a bit inconsistent, but I think he can be kind of like Malcolm Butler solid. You know, he could be a little bit better, but I do know he's going to get burnt some games. In other games, he's going to shut people down. But he's not going to be someone who will shut down the number 1 wide receiver. He probably shut down the 2nd wide receiver, but I do think he will be solid. We go to Christian Fulton. I think this should be a sophomore year for him. You know, this should be a good year for him. He should really step up. I'm expecting big things from Christian Fulton. I'm probably even expecting him to be the number 1 cornerback, you know, to hold down the number 1 wide receivers. You know, just until our number 1 draft pick proves he's good or if he's okay, but Christian Fulton should be a pretty solid cornerback this year. So that leads me to our 3rd cornerback, our number 1 draft pick, Caleb Farley. This guy has great potential. Like, he could be a all-star in this game. The biggest gamble is his injury, which y'all already know. But I like this gamble, you know, go and get the big stars to try to make this team a Super Bowl contender. Because if he does work out, he's going to be a really good corner. He will be that number 1 corner. And I'm really liking his secondary's potential. Talk about the safeties. I think they're the weak point. I really don't think Kevin Byard has done anything good since his 2018 season. He's been solid. He was solid 2019, but last year he wasn't really that good. And I think we have Dan Cruikshank as strong safety. I don't think he's that good. I would put Elijah Moulton at strong safety and see what he can do. I think he has more potential than Dan Cruikshank. And I do think mid-season, when Dan Cruikshank doesn't really produce that much, they might make the switch to Elijah Moulton. Because I do think that they decided they're going to make him as a safety. I could be wrong, but that's what I've been hearing. And I do like his potential as a safety. I think he can be an excellent safety. So yeah, that's my thoughts of the secondary. I do think we're going to be solid on that part. I'm not really worried about much, except for the defensive coordinator. But now to go into the interior. Much improved. I really think it's much improved. With the addition of Danico Autry and Bud Dupree, I do think this pass rush will be better. I do think that Bud Dupree is someone we really did need it. I think he's going to produce way better than Jadeveon Clowney. I mean, Jadeveon Clowney didn't even produce, so, you know, that's not hard to do. But I do think he's a guy that can get at least 5 to 6 sacks, you know, hold it down, be solid, you know, in the run game. And I do think Danico Autry can do the same thing. They are pretty good additions. I have no complaints between them two. Who I do got to complain about is Rashad Evans. He didn't do nothing last year. I mean, he had a half a sack, 1 tackle for loss. He did have a fumble recovery, but he didn't really do anything in the run game. He was struggling. I really hope he does improve this year and picks it up, because he didn't really do anything last year, and he's like the only person I'm really worried about in the interior defense. Like, he's my biggest worry. Because I don't know if he's going to be able to produce. I don't know if he's ever going to be good in the run game or in coverage. Because he also didn't have an interception either. But, you know, it's not like it's something that's going to hinder our defense. Because we do have really good players. Like my next player that I'm going to talk about, Jeffrey Simmons. I do think this is going to be his best year. I think he's going to get at least 10 sacks. Well, I say 8 to 10 sacks. I'm not going to go all the way to 10. That's like a big bold prediction. But I do feel like he has the potential to get 10 to 12 sacks this year. But to be safe, I'd say 7 to 8. But he will be solid. He will be solid in the run game, and he will be solid at pressuring the quarterback. I think he's the best player on this defense. I think he has Pro Bowl potential. Heck, I even think he has All-Pro potential. And if there's any player that I believe will make a big impact on this defense, it's going to be Jeffrey Simmons. But we move on to who I think is the 2nd best player on this defense, Jayon Brown. Excellent in coverage. Like a solid cover linebacker. I feel like he took a little step back last year, but with the swagger that this defense can have, and if they're playing good, I do think he will vibe off of that, and I think he will have a good season. I like Jayon Brown. I think he's a really good player. I've definitely had some great moments watching Jayon Brown. So I also want to talk about Monty Rice. He could be Rashad Evans' replacement. Now, I'm not really sure about that. If Rashad Evans does produce, that's not going to happen. But I'm pretty certain that's why they drafted him. You know, go out there and find the best possible talent, and you know, they drafted Monty Rice. They thought he was the right guy for it. Now, is his potential high? I don't really think so, but I do think his potential is solid. I do think his potential will be like a pretty good replacement for Rashad Evans, but I don't know if he'll be a Pro Bowler. I don't know if he'll make a huge impact on the defense. And I also heard that he was in relations with Isaiah Wilson. I don't know if that's like anything that will impact him. You know, I give him the benefit of doubt. He could be a different person than Isaiah Wilson. Isaiah Wilson was just god awful of a pick. I can't believe somebody doesn't really care to that extent about their career. But we move. Harold Landry. Unlike Rashad Evans, I do have faith that Harold Landry will bounce back this season, and I do think he has potential to be the second best player on this defense. I do think he will be rivaling Bud Dupree for the second most sacks, and he could even be better than Bud Dupree, which I think is most likely. I do think that Harold Landry is very good, but I think that last year wasn't really a good year for anybody on the defense. So I'm expecting some real bounce backs on some players that should be good, like Jeffrey Simmons, Harold Landry, and Jayon Brown. Let me give you some predictions of what I think the playmakers of the defense are going to get, like stats. What are their stats going to be? I want to start with Jeffrey Simmons. Like I said, he's going to have like 8 to 7 sacks, maybe 10 to 12 at the most. I think he'll have like 2 or 3 forced fumbles. I think he'll have like 5 tackles for losses. You know, maybe 5 to 7 tackle for losses. Jayon Brown, I think he'll have 4 interceptions. I think he's going to have a great coverage year. I also think he'll make an impact in the run game, maybe like, 4 or 5 tackles for losses. But I think his real money is going to be made in the coverage. Someone to lock down them tight ends. Denico Autry, I think he'll have probably like 3 to 4 sacks. Pretty solid, but not a big of an impact. I'm going to say Bud Dupree about 4 or 5 sacks, and I'm also give Harold Landry about 6 to 7 sacks. I think they'll be contesting with Jeffrey Simmons for the leader in sacks, and I think they're going to be pretty good. Rashad Evans, I'll give him 3 sacks. I'll give him 3, maybe 4 sacks. I'll give him a fumble recovery. I'll give him maybe 2 tackles for loss. I don't really expect much from Rashad Evans. I do think that Monty Rice might come in and do an impact as well. I do think Monty Rice might have a sack or 2. I do think he might have a tackle for loss. I do think he might even have a fumble recovery. We never know. But I do like the depth that the Titans have gotten in the interior. Now we go to the secondary. Norris Jenkins, maybe 2 interceptions. I think he'll have 2 interceptions, possibly 3, and he'll probably have like 4 to 6 deflections. We could see him get burnt a couple of times, by elite wide receivers, that they decide, let's just put Norris Jenkins on the number 1, and he just ends up getting burnt. But I do think he will be able to cover the number 1s for extent of time, but I don't think he will be able to hold that to where he's consistently shutting them down. Which brings me to Christian Fulton. I do think he will be a good number 1. I do think he'll be a solid cornerback at the number 1 position. I think he'll be able to hold down the number 1 wide receiver for the most part. He won't be able to hold down the elite wide receivers, but I do think he'll be an okay number 1 corner. I really see potential in him for being a number 1 corner. But the one who I see the most potential, and I've already said this, Caleb Farley. If he doesn't have a relapse of injury, I do think he will be an elite number 1 corner. I do think he will be able to shut down a number 1 wide receiver. So I'm going to give Christian Fulton 3 to 4 INTs, and I'm going to give Caleb Farley the same. I don't think he's going to be that impressive in the first year. And I'll give Christian Fulton, about 6 deflections. I give Caleb Farley about 2 2 to 4. I think they'll all be able to hold it down in the solos for the most part, and I think they'll have some great assists. Now to go to Kevin Byard, he's high and low. He can go from having no interceptions to having 6 interceptions. You never know what's going to happen with Kevin Byard. And I do think that, a couple of these secondary players are going to get a couple of sacks. I think Caleb Farley will be good at getting sacks. I think that's why they drafted him. They liked it how he could, rush the passer, and also his speed helps for that. So, he'd be a great cover corner, and he'll also be good in the sack game. But on the Crookshank, I don't expect much from him. I do think he probably will muster up a couple of deflections. He'll be solid for, kind of solid, but I don't think he'll be that good. I do think he is the most weakest link in here, but I think that's kind of obvious. I think if we put Elijah Moulton there, I'd be a little bit less worried about the strong safety position. I want to talk about briefly Brayon Borders. I like Brayon Borders. I think he was one of my favorite cornerbacks last year. He was really doing good in coverage last year. So yeah, I really like Brayon Borders, and I think he'll be a good depth corner. I do think this is going to be a solid defense this year, and I do think they're going to be at least top 15 to top 12 defense. If the defensive coordinator can, improve this defense. Like Mike Rebel said that it was the defensive coordinator that was controlling defense last year, but I'm just hoping that it was mainly Mike Vrabel, and this defensive coordinator can make an impact and can be solid, can be pretty okay. Like, I'm really hoping that Mike Vrabel had the reins of the defense last year, and that's why he wasn't producing good. I'm hoping this defensive coordinator, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he can be at least decent. If he's at least decent, then this defense can be good, because the players, the talent we have, can shine with decent defensive coordination. So that is my thoughts on the defense of the Titans 2021 season. I do think the defense is going to be solid. Much improved from last year, but anything can happen. They can be bad because the defensive coordinator is bad, but I'm really hoping that what I say comes true and they're actually a good defense and it can actually hold it down. But this is Titans Universe. Ending it here. Till next time, like and subscribe.